Welcome to side mission number 3, the Witch of Ringtown. I went out there to kill Mrs. Mummey. She put a hex on me that day. Words uttered by a 23-year-old man who committed murder in order to save himself from constant mental torment. Who was the young man, and who was this supposed witch? Stay with me and find out. In episode 41, we discussed the murder of Nelson Raymeyer, which signaled the beginning of what would be known as the Hex Scare in rural Pennsylvania. This murder marks the end of the Hex Scare that lasted from Raymeyer's death in 1928 and included murders and mysterious deaths in 1929, 1930, and 1932. Susanna Furman Mummey, known by most as Susan, was born in 1870. Her first marriage to Isaac Edward Brown may not have been a marriage at all, according to family records. They had one child together, Amy, before he died in 1929. Her second marriage was to Henry Mummey in 1904. He had 4 children of his own from a previous marriage, and the two seemed to have a happy relationship. Until 1910, anyway. In July of that year, Susan had a dream and an overwhelming sense that if her husband went to work that day, she would never see him again. Henry worked at the DuPont powder mill, crushing powder for explosives. He brushed her off. He had 5 children total to care for, and if he missed work, how was he going to put food on the table? The afternoon of July 5th, 1910, the DuPont powder mill was leveled by an explosion. Henry was blown 50 feet in the air, landing in an apple tree. Burned and mangled, he would be dead within minutes. Susan's vision had come true, and the locals soon found out about it. She was seen as having psychic powers, and perhaps she was even a witch. People avoided her, some were afraid of her, and thus was born the Witch of Ringtown. Albert Shinksey was a well-liked, handsome young man, seeing Selina Bernstall, a popular young woman. Albert met Susan Mummey when he was 17, working for a farm that shared a boundary with her property. Unfortunately, Susan had a dispute with a neighboring farmer, one of many she wound up having with locals that had abandoned her to rumors. Susan's complaints were over the property line. Albert says his troubles with her began that day as he was walking back through the contested land. He saw Mummey staring at him, and he felt her staring. He claimed to have broken out in a cold sweat and felt hands around his neck. He would never be the same again. For 7 years, his physical and mental health deteriorated. He was no longer the energetic young man he once was. He was often exhausted, emaciated, and burdened with mental torment. It became increasingly difficult for him to hold down a job for very long. Selina became the journal of his mental downfall. She described him as a, quote, little puppy and a, quote, lost soul. She became his only friend during all of this internal struggling. She would later tell of the hex upon him, one she even believed was true. She would wake up in the morning and notice that Albert was in tremendous pain. He would tell her that he was attacked by an evil black cat. The creature had glowing red eyes and would claw at his face and even grow so large that he thought it would smother him in his sleep. Sometimes it would shapeshift into the face of Mummey herself and stare down at him. Selina said that Albert had begged Mummey to lift the curse, but that she had refused. Selina had also asked Albert to marry her many times, but he said the curse would not let him do that. Albert went to local powwowers who prescribed such things as sticking pins in his wrist and drinking potions made of fireflies. As per modern powwowing, sticking a needle in boiling beef while it is cooking will cause the witch that cursed you to feel the same pain, and the spell will be broken. So this was probably some sort of attempt at doing the same thing to Mummey. In powwowing, fireflies are used to drive away negativity. Unfortunately, none of these things worked, and Albert grew worse. Finally, one evening, a, quote, spirit from the sky appeared to Albert, telling him that the only way to get rid of the curse was to kill Susan Mummey, and it told him exactly how to do it. shoot her with homemade shotgun slugs known as pumpkin balls. Now Albert Shinksey finally had the answer to ridding himself of the curse. He just needed the gumption to do it. On March 17, 1934, a shotgun blast rang out at the home of Susan Mummey. It went through a window and struck the 63-year-old in her right side, passing through her lung and heart, instantly killing her. The police had a few suspects, as there were many who were questioned that thought ill of Susan Mummey. Some even claimed that she was the Witch of Ringtown and that she had hexed cattle and horses. But one person seemed to have an especially intense dislike for her, and that was her next-door neighbor, a farmer called John Stone. Everyone questioned knew that he believed Susan had hexed his cows, and they told the lead detective, Buono, that they were in constant disputes over their property line and who should be responsible for fixing the fences for the cattle. Buono questioned Stone, who was extremely unhelpful, not allowing either him nor his partner, Detective Ferns, into the house. Buono knew him personally and also knew that he had a 12-gauge shotgun capable of firing the pumpkin ball shot. Stone refused to let him see it, making him appear even more guilty. But when the shotgun was finally confiscated, it turned out to not be the weapon used. The detectives were back to square one with no other leads. 3 days later, however, a group of boys approached the police to tell them about a taxi they had seen sitting near Mrs. Mummey's home. The one described belonged to Albert Shinksey. Buono also knew Shinksey and couldn't believe what he was hearing. But with no other leads, he made his way to Albert's house to bring him in for questioning. Buono sat Albert at a table with himself and Detective Ferns. He gave him a soda. Buono addressed Albert saying, "We have reports that your vehicle was seen on the lane leading to the Mummey residence the night that Susan Mummey was killed. Were you out that night?" "I sure was," answered Albert. When Buono asked him what he was doing there, Albert answered, "I went out there to kill Mrs. Mummey." He then proceeded to tell both detectives of his 7-year torment with the hex, concluding that he had committed the murder in self-defense. He was relieved that it was finally all over, and that he felt like a new man. Buono asked him if he ever sought the help of medical doctors for his ailment, and Albert told him that he did, and they had done nothing more than recommend cold showers. While the prosecution sought the death penalty for Albert, the locals put together a defense fund for him, most of them believing that they themselves had been hexed by Susan at one point or another. Throughout the trial, Shinksey remained steadfast in his belief that Mummey had caused all of his problems. Quote, "I had to kill her," he told reporters. "The electric chair will be better than the suffering of the last 7 years." Psychiatrists declared Albert had premature dementia, a chronic psychotic disorder marked by hallucinations and usually beginning in early adulthood. Today, we would refer to this condition as schizophrenia. Albert was sent to Fairview State Hospital, a place now described by those who had the misfortune of staying there as a living hell. While Selena attempted to stand by him during the early years of his confinement, Albert let her go, still refusing to marry her, even though she had suggested it while he was admitted to Fairview. She eventually married and moved to Bucks County. Albert was released in 1976. He lived for 7 years as a free man before his death in 1983. He is buried at Our Lady of Fatima Cemetery in Shenandoah Heights, Pennsylvania. Thank you for listening. Stay spooky and don't die. But if you do, contact me.